Welcome to a small, medium at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Hyson, bringing you intimate stories that heal. Returning back for another interview on a small, medium at large podcast is my dear friend, Russell Targ. Russell and I met in 1998 at Interval Research in an interview for subjects to participate in a research project called the Phenome Project with Dean Radin and Russell Targ. We met twice a week doing precognitive remote viewing. This is where our lifelong friendship began. For all of you new listeners, let me tell you about Russell Targ. Russell is a physicist and author who is a pioneer in the development of the laser and co-founder of the Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 1970s and 1980s. Russell Targ has received 2 National Aeronautics and Space Administration Awards for inventions and contributions in laser and laser communication, and has published over 100 scientific papers on lasers, plasma physics, and ESP research. Russell Targ has been successfully teaching people how to tap into their psychic abilities for more than 50 years. This began in 1972 when he co-founded a CIA-sponsored ESP research program at Stanford Research Institute. The program yielded such incredible results as the description of a secret Russian weapons factory in Siberia and the location of several kidnapped U.S. officials, including the ambassador to Iran. The founders also trained 6 Army intelligence officers to create an Army psychic corps that became known as Stargate. His newest book, Third Eye Spies, Learning from the Masters, is a memoir of his 5 decades teaching and investigating remote viewing. This book will introduce you to the most successful and gifted remote viewers in the world, along with the evidence of their psychic abilities. Remote viewing is the opportunity to describe and experience objects and events in the distance, past, and future. Russell Targ shares the simple techniques the masters of remote viewing use to be able to expand your mind's eye beyond your physical location. With Third Eye Spies, you will be able to step beyond the boundaries of your physical body and learn to live with psychic abilities. Explore the evidence of psychic powers and learn the skills of remote viewing from the masters yourself. Russell Targ's newest book, Third Eye Spies, Masters of Remote Viewing, will be available on Amazon on May 1st and can be pre-ordered now. Dean Radin, chief scientist at the ION, says Russell Targ's Third Eye Spies is a masterwork in the history and practice of remote viewing. April 11th, Russell celebrated his 89th birthday. Let's welcome him here today. Welcome, Russell.
Hi, Gail. I'm happy to be here with you. Talk about our favorite subject.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here with you too today. I have to ask you right away, why did you decide to write another book?
Well, it's really a celebration of 50 years of remote viewing. We had a conference at a place right across from Stanford Research Institute where we had 250 people who had been associated with the program who got together. I don't know if you can see the picture behind me of Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ 50 years ago, and a couple of months ago, we got together to celebrate that people are still doing remote viewing, and they're using it in all sorts of applications. That is their remote viewer. There's an organization called the International Remote Viewing Association that's applied remote viewing more than research. They're working with police, searching for lost children, and many of them are making money forecasting sporting events in the stock market. So it's become very applied now in many ways, rather than saying, does it really exist?
Mm-hmm.
So the remote viewing that I'm talking about, that we did at SRI, is really taught to us by Ingo Swann, who's one of the masters that I refer to in my book, where we learned that remote viewing is a natural ability. You can quiet your mind and describe the surprising images that come into your awareness. You can look into the distance and describe what's going on there. You can look into the future and describe what will be happening in your future. And the important thing is that it's no harder to describe what's going on thousands of miles away than it is to describe across the street. Similarly, it's no harder to describe the pictures you're going to see an hour or a few days in the future as the ones you're going to see right now.
So these are things you've learned over the 50 years of research in this remote viewing, the different applications and different people that you've worked with. You've learned a lot of things about it over the years.
It's the idea that consciousness permeates everything.
Mm-hmm.
That you can see down to the size of an atom, you can see as far away as Jupiter, 500 million miles away. And if you're guided where to put your attention, then you're able to do that.
So I enjoyed reading the book very much and learning more about the different remote viewers that you worked with and world-class remote viewers. But I was wondering if we could go to an area in the book that you talked about. In your new book, you talk about precognitive dreaming and it being the most common psychic event to appear in the life of the average person. Could you explain to our listeners what precognitive dreaming is? And if you have any examples you can share with us about this?
Well, many people have the experience that they wake up in the morning and they tell their partner, gee, I had this amazing dream about such and such, and then later in the day that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that happens all the time. And it became clear to me that that's not the only source of remote viewing, but is a common source of remote viewing, and generally the most high quality, reliable ones. I often have, or every few months, I'll have a very sharp precognitive dream. And I know that telling somebody about a dream is a little bit like telling them about your last night's acid trip, not necessarily the most interesting thing. But some of my dreams are very sharp. And the way I don't record my dreams, sorry to say, but in order to get credit for a dream, I have to tell my wife, Patricia, about the dream I had before it occurs. So if I do that, then I can get credited in the big credit book.
That's exactly, if I didn't have David laying by my side in the morning when I wake up for me to say whatever crazy dream I have about what's going to happen, I would not have a validator person either. It's great to have the spouse to tell the dreams to when you wake up.
That's right.
So do you have any examples, or can you share with us any of the dream precognition dreams you've had in the past?
I could share some examples with you. Let's see if we can go to the share screen here.
Shall we start here at Esalen, and then we can go into the samples of precognitive dreaming?
Yes. Well, Esalen is a meeting place in Big Sur, California, right on the cliffs above the ocean, where the hot water from the baths pour into the sea. The very luxurious, comfortable places. It was started by Mike Murphy about 60 years ago. And I've been teaching there for about 50 years. And a dozen years ago, I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm tired of teaching the same thing. So I had not been to beloved Esalen for a dozen years. And I had a dream about going to Esalen, and I didn't have enough money to cross the river. like trying to go from one place to another place in the dream. I couldn't pay the toll booth. Of course, there is no toll booth at Esalen, and I do have enough money, but I was longing to be with all my friends here. This is the picture I have is a so-called big house where we'll have often 15 or 20 people gathered in a circle. And in the dream, I wanted to be here with my friends. And I told Patricia in the morning, I dreamt about Esalen. We had not been there for a dozen years, so I'm not thinking about Esalen. In order for a precognitive dream to be recognized, it has to be not a wish fulfillment dream. It has to be not, I dreamt about winning the lottery. I dreamt about doing something I want. Or it shouldn't be an anxiety dream. If you dream about failing a math test and you hadn't studied for the math test, that wouldn't be precognitive. It'd be what you expect. So a dream should neither be a wish fulfillment dream or an anxiety dream. It should be something outside of your normal thought pattern. So you can recognize when you wake up, say, was that an ordinary dream about that I've got to do the housework or I got to pay my bills, or this dream outside of what I'm thinking about? And I could surely say when I woke up, yeah, I hadn't thought about Esalen for more than 10 years. So that was really outside of my thoughts. And I told Patricia about it. And then the next thing I do in my morning activity is I go to my desk where I am right now and turn on the computer, and I look at my mail, and my first mail was a letter from my friend Jeffrey Kripal, who's a professor at Rice University, and he sent me the picture that you see here as the opening picture of a film he's making about Esalen. Now, I didn't know he was making a film about Esalen, even though I happened to be in this picture. So I had a dream about a surprise picture that even included myself. You see, I was dreaming anxiety that I couldn't get to Esalen, and here I am at Esalen. So that was a high quality dream for me. First thing I see in the morning is exactly what I told Patricia that I was interested in. So I thought that, how do you explain that? The picture didn't appear, picture wasn't anywhere until I opened the file on my computer, but it was the first thing I saw. So what I would say is that from my ESP research, that the picture I saw in the morning was the cause of my having that dream. In spite of the fact that I'm doing ESP research, I'm basically a physicist, and I believe that events have causes. So what caused me to have this surprising dream about Esalen? And I would say that my experience of seeing this picture on my screen at 8 o'clock is what caused me to have a dream basically about that picture 2 hours earlier. So another way of saying that is that my waking dream at 8 o'clock is entangled with my sleeping dream at 6 o'clock. Those two brains are, of course, the same brain, but my 8 o'clock has this interesting picture put into it, and it's entangled with my sleeping brain. So this idea of entanglement is now totally believable. 3 physicists just got Nobel Prizes last July for showing that photons can be entangled. And John Clauser has a lab in Berkeley, and I visited his lab in 1972 when he first showed that photons born together will remain entangled together. And he had to wait 50 years to get a Nobel Prize. I saw him in 72, and it was 2022, he finally got his Nobel Prize along with two other European scientists. So the idea of things being entangled and carrying information from one place to another is now part of modern physics. So saying that my brain seeing this picture at 8 o'clock was entangled with my sleeping brain is a logical or coherent thing to say. We haven't proved it's due to entanglement, but we know that my experience at 8 o'clock is what caused me to have the dream 2 hours earlier. And we think that that's probably one of the reasons that experiments where you get immediate feedback are the most successful. When I asked Gail to describe what is the object on my desk that I'm going to show her on the computer, as soon as she says something, as soon as she finishes the description, I will show a full screen picture of that to Gail. And doing experiments that way, she has been very, very successful.
In fact, we'll talk about that a little later in our show. We're going to share a little bit about that. I was wondering, before you pass up on that last slide, did you want to mention who was in this group that you were meeting with? Were there other physicists or?
Well, Elizabeth Rauscher, who is a physics professor at UC Berkeley, and she's a theoretical physicist who worked with me for decades on developing a model for the universe that we live in being partly real, partly complex numbers, so that in a certain sense, you can always find a path from where you are to a distant place, independent of how far away it is. There is always a path of even though you can be separated by hundreds of miles, there's in real space. In real space, I might be here, you might be in Chicago, but there will always be a path through complex space-time where that path is zero distance. And again, that's a model that does not generate any bad physics, but certainly meets the data that we have in our experiments. The fact that we live in a complex space-time where for consciousness, there's always a path of zero distance.
So I see we were going to move on to the next slide. And I believe this is another precognitive dream you had.
Yeah, I'm going to show you just two more of these.
Okay.
That sort of led to the answer. In this case, I had a very, very clear dream, basically of what I'm showing here. I dreamt of an electric train traveling in a closed path around the living room in my house. What I show here is the front page. I should have shown these pictures in the other order, but I'm here now. What I'm showing here is the elevated in Chicago with the front page picture on the New York Times, which is what I got to see when I woke up. I'm going to show you what I dreamt about. This is my living room, and I dreamt that there was an electric train running around the place where I have colored lights right now. So I dreamt that there was like a German Mark-Light train, a very square-bodied electric train. I don't have such a train, and I didn't have trains in this house. I've been in the house 50 years. My children had gone away. But I dreamt about this electric train going where the lights are here, going in a circle. So that's what I told Patty about it. There were electric trains in our living room. And then the first thing I see when I open my computer in the morning, front page of the New York Times, for some reason, they had decided to show that the elevated train, which is 100 years old in Chicago, where I grew up, this picture happens to be of the electric train in the loop, the elevated train in the loop, right above my father's bookstore on Dearborn Avenue in Chicago.
I
So
think
this
that's
is
incredible.
so that's a Chicago place that I know very well. And there's the elevated train that I got for feedback. So I thought, so when I saw that picture, I was really shocked because it so accurately resembled what my dream was about, the electric train going in a circle. That was as good a match for my mind as the Esalen experience.
Absolutely.
And I'll show you one more. They say 3 in the row is the proof. So you have to guess what this could have been. So I had a dream. In this dream, I was with my wife Patricia, and she was pulling a pig on a leash. She had this giant gray pig that she was pulling along the pavement. And when I woke up, I knew that that's a precognitive dream because it's so outlandish. There are no pigs in our life at all. We don't live on a farm. We live in the middle of a city. So how could I possibly dream about Patty pulling a pig on a leash? So I went shuffling into the kitchen, still in my pajamas, and said, Patty, I got a dream I have to tell you about. In this dream, you're leading a giant gray pig. And she said, well, that's very interesting. There's a pig on the TV screen right over my head. And what was on the TV screen is what I show here. Now, my vision is not very good, as some of you may know. So Patty was kidding me. That's, of course, not a pig, it's a pumpkin. But from where I was standing, she said, there's a pig in the truck. And I was willing to believe that that was a pig, where you can see the large gray body and the tail sticking out. Of course, it's coming up on the Halloween. It's not a pig, it's a pumpkin. It's a 1-ton pumpkin. But what is important for me about it is it shows that my dream was caused not so much by the image that was in the screen, but what I experienced it. That is, when I looked at that thing and Patty said, there's your pig, I believed her until I walked up to it and saw it wasn't a pig at all. But it was the image that I got for feedback from my dream that was really the cause of the dream. So what I got to see at 7 o'clock in the morning was the cause of my dream a half hour earlier. And what seals the deal for me is that what I dreamt was about a pig, but what I was shown was about a pumpkin, but I thought it was a pig. So it shows that the dream that I have is caused by what I think I'm looking at more than what's really there. So it shows really that the image I experience is the cause of my dream at a later time.
These are wonderful examples of precognitive dreaming. And any of our listeners may pay attention to their dreams now after this explanation. But I'm also wondering, what are the practical, these are great examples of precognition, but have you ever used this remote viewing for practical applications?
Yes, if precognition is interesting, but is it useful for anything? And the answer is yes. Shortly after I left SRI in 1982, I wanted to begin to apply this precognition. The work we did at SRI looking for kidnapped soldiers or downed airplanes or Soviet weapons factories is what paid the bills at SRI. But I wanted to see if we could put this to a practical application, working with a psychologist, Keith Harari, who's a very experienced viewer. We designed an experiment together with Stephen Schwartz, where where we were trying to forecast changes in the silver commodity market. Now, you can't do that by reading the numbers on the big board, the big commodity market board in Wall Street. It'd be nice if I could just say, Keith, what is silver going to be next Friday? And it's, in our experience, reading numbers or letters is very, very difficult to do.
Mhm.
So Stephen Schwartz, the idea is to do something called associative remote viewing, where some other person not directly involved in the experiment will consider the possibilities for the market. The market can go up a little, up a lot, down a little, or down a lot. And that person who's separated from us will then choose objects to match those four conditions. The objects are not subjectively related to them. For example, we did an experiment where the broker would choose four objects. He might choose a silver statue, a book, a coffee cup, and a leftover pancake from breakfast. So those are the four objects. And each of those correspond to a state of the market. And we don't know anything about it. He's up in Marin. Keith and I are in Palo Alto, sitting at my coffee table. And I say, okay, Keith, here we are, Monday morning. Next Friday, I'm going to put an object in your hand. I have no idea what it is. I don't know anything about the objects. And the object will be determined by what the market does. And I wouldn't say that because we already know that. And we don't want to get involved in analysis thinking about the market. So I just say, just quiet your mind and tell me what comes into your awareness. What do you see? And he said, well, I see something kind of round and floppy and has a funny smell. I don't like the smell. And I said, can you draw that? And he basically drew a round floppy circle and wrote funny smell. And I said, well, in our experience, that's really a very comprehensive drawing because it's a very unusual thing for a person to say.
Mhm.
So I said, that sounds good, Keith. You can go home and we'll get together Friday and I'll see what the broker has for us on Friday. So I then call John Rendy, our broker in Marin, and say, what are your objects this week? He said, well, I got the silver statue, I got a coffee cup, I have a book, and I got my leftover pancake from breakfast. And he said to me, well, that your round floppy object with a funny smell sounds an awful lot like my leftover pancake. And I said, yes, what does that mean? Does it mean up a little, up a lot, down a little, or down a lot? And he said that is associated with the idea of down a lot. So the magic comes into the program where John Rendy, the broker, has to be courageous enough to sell $50,000 worth of silver based on the fact that Harari saw a pancake. And it turned out that was one of our most successful hits. And of course, you can make money in the market by buying silver when it goes up, but you can make even more money by selling silver when it goes down. So we did that strange sounding experiment, which you call associative remote viewing. We did that 9 weeks in a row, and Harari chose the correct object all 9 times.
Wow.
He was 9 times in a row where the chances are 1 in 4. And the broker was courageous enough. See, the broker is spending tens of thousands of dollars of his customers' money. In this case, it's our benefactor's money, but he's spending real money in the market based on what the psychic and Palo Alto has to say, and it can be any kind of crazy thing, from a Barbie doll to a leftover pancake, and all 7 of his investments were correct, and we made $250,000 forecasting silver, and that was a front page story in the Wall Street Journal.
Well, that's very impressive. I wonder how many listeners are going to probably start trying this after hearing how to do this today.
Well, I described the procedure. The procedure sounds a little far-fetched, I'm aware, so I describe it in detail in the book. In fact, I also describe how to work with a partner and develop your psychic abilities.
Wonderful.
But the point of the story is that many people think that psychic abilities are unreliable or not accurate. But in our experience in 20 years at SRI, the remote viewing with a helpful interviewer and an experienced psychic, remote viewing can be both accurate and reliable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there was another question I have, and all my questions here are regards with having read through your book. I was wondering if you could tell us about the founders of the Theosophical Society. My dad used to go there, and 19th century pioneers in applied clairvoyance.
The idea here is that remote viewing is not New Age.
Right.
I was a member of the Theosophical Society when I left graduate school. So I've been associated with them since the 1950s. My father was a publisher and published a biography of Helena Blavatsky, who was a brilliant woman in addition to being a psychic. And she formed in 1885, Helena Blavatsky formed the Theosophical Society for the purpose of understanding the nature of the universe and understanding man's latent abilities. So she wants to know what is the universe made of, and how can we interact with the universe. So she was very interested in psychic things and clairvoyance, and she was working with Charles Leadbeater, who was a very prolific psychic, remote viewer, psychic artist, and Annie Besant, who is his devotee, who is also a very successful psychic practitioner, and she became the president of the society after the death of Helena Blavatsky. So these three here were key people in the development of the Theosophical Society. And Blavatsky had the idea in 1895 that the physical world now had a list of chemicals and the elements of the world, of the table of the elements, and she thought that there should be a psychic periodic table. So the periodic table describes all the elements in their order by atomic number, and she thought that there should be some corresponding psychic thing. What do the elements look like psychically? And she asked Charles Leadbeater to get a block of paraffin, because somebody told her that paraffin had a lot of hydrogen in it, and hydrogen is the first atomic element, and paraffin is full of hydrogen. Paraffin has a atomic formula of C20H80. So a paraffin block is 80% hydrogen. So if you focus your psychic wand into paraffin, you're very likely to find some hydrogen, because 80% of it's hydrogen. And what Annie Besant and Leadbeater did that experiment. Annie Besant wrote a book called Occult Chemistry, and what Leadbeater saw is the drawing that I have on the right here. This is an actual drawing photograph of his drawing that I took from his. I took this from Occult Chemistry, published in 1895. And these two triangles he drew are two protons. And at the corner of each proton is a fundamental. Let me get rid of my phone.
Okay.
The fundamental atomic mass at each corner. And each of these triangles represents a proton. And the masses at each corner are held together by bands of energy, he said. So these triangular thing that he drew, I realize that pointing to my screen is not helpful to you. The triangular mass of the triangles that he drew correspond to the mass of the proton. That was 1895. The picture that I have on the right is a contemporary drawing of a proton, as described by Murray Gell-Mann in 1965. So that's 70 years later. And again, he has the three quarks, what he calls two up quarks and a down quark, in a triangular way, and they're held together by gluons. I can't resist pointing to them with my finger. So the triangular shape of the quarks held together is now the accepted model for what a proton would look like. That is the circular drawing on the right is the accepted model for a proton now, with the three quarks held together. Leadbeater didn't know about up quarks and down quarks. That came later. But Gell-Mann had up quarks and down quarks held together by gluons in a configuration exactly like Leadbeater drew 70 years before. In fact, he did this, of course, 70 years before the development of quantum physics. And the drawing he made is on the right. His impression of a proton so sharply resembles a contemporary scientific drawing of the proton that is really shockingly accurate. He's able to look into the bar of paraffin and see something that's 10 to the minus 10th centimeters. That is the smallest thing in the world, smallest conceivable thing in the world. He is able to somehow experience that. And needless to say, he did not get any feedback.
Right.
So an important thing here is the idea of these triangular shapes of quarks was not developed until 1965. So that'll be a long time after all those people were deceased. So they did not. So it's important for me to point out that remote viewing and psychic functioning does not depend on the feedback of the answer, because needless to say, these great psychics did not get any feedback about the nature of protons.
I find it fascinating that in 1895, maybe we were thinking that people back then were, trying to have seances or contact the dead or levitate tables and things. I'm not sure if that was starting back then, but the fact that these people were doing scientific drawings, that I think is fascinating, that this was going on. This is over 100-something years ago.
That's right. Helena Blavatsky is the first person to conceive of the idea of a psychic periodic table. That's like that by itself is a huge leap of consciousness that she would even think to ask her partner, I'd like you to look into a protons were not all, were all protons were conceived of, but nobody had found one yet. Rutherford didn't find it until 20 years later. So you didn't have anything like a proton. The conception was there. People knew about hydrogen atoms, but they didn't know what they looked like. And as far as we could describe today, what Leadbeater drew is as close to a drawing of a proton as we would have in the 21st century.
Very. Now, was there, I'm only seeing up to the bottom of the screen where it says by Charles. Oh, there we go. Okay, there was the rest of it. Okay. So now this brings me to my next question before we go to this. In your book, you tell us about Ingo Swann's remote viewing of Jupiter. Again, he couldn't get feedback right then. Can you share what he discovered back then?
Yes, I was with, except for this 1895 experiment, I was in on all the things we were talking about here.
Yes.
In this case, I sold the idea. A small digression. I've been doing laser work for 15 years by 1972, and I'd built a very powerful laser, and I'd worked for NASA and for the CIA, and I was ready to, but all my life I'd been interested in psychic things, and I'd done magic on the stage for a decade. So I'd built something that I call an ESP teaching machine, which is a 4-choice trainer game that you can get from the Apple store. And it gives you an opportunity to get feedback and reinforcement for guessing the right one of four objects. So anyway, I brought this game to a meeting I had with NASA on speculative technology. And I met Werner von Braun, and I told him I wanted to start a program to teach people to get in touch with their psychic abilities. And he took me to the director of NASA, James Fletcher, and with the help of von Braun and Fletcher and Edgar Mitchell, I was able to start a program at SRI teaching people how to get in touch with their psychic abilities. The point of the story is that von Braun did exceptionally well with this ESP game. Every time he would hit the button, a bell would ring. So he drew a crowd. So it was clear to him and to everybody else that this von Braun character not only was a great rocketeer, but he must have been psychic also. So I had a program to develop a ESP game and teach people how to get in touch with their psychic abilities. This was a NASA program. So I had a NASA scientist, George Pesders, come and visit me. He was our contract monitor. And he was in my office with Ingo Swann, who we worked with often. And he said, Ingo, you're able to, are you able to see planets? Could you tell if something was happening on Jupiter? Because we're going to be launching Pioneer 2 to Jupiter. Could you look at Jupiter in the future and tell us if we're going to see anything new that we didn't know before? And Ingo said, yeah, give me a pencil and paper and I'll show you. And he made a drawing that I show here. And he said, the main thing you're going to find is that there's a large ring around Jupiter, much brighter and stronger than you might imagine. And George said, you're thinking of Saturn, aren't you? And Ingo said, I've been looking at the solar system my entire life. I can tell the difference between Jupiter and Saturn. So when your spacecraft gets there, I expect you to send me a photograph showing what Jupiter looks like with the rings around Jupiter. And 7 months later, after Pioneer 2 got to Jupiter, NASA created the image on the right. That's not a photograph, of course, but it's NASA's image of the rings around Jupiter, which are absolutely unknown at the time that Ingo described them. So Ingo just made this nice drawing of Jupiter with the ring around it at a time when the whole idea of ring around Jupiter did not, brand new idea.
And did you speak to Ingo when this information came out, and how was his response? Was it,
He said, oh yeah, that's just the way I saw it. That's just what I drew.
That's wonderful.
So the thing that's important about this, and the reason I'm showing them that order, it shows that you can see Jupiter, which is 500 million miles away, or you can see inside of a block of paraffin and see something the size of a proton, which is 10 to the minus 10 centimeters, which is as small as you could even, smaller than you could even imagine. So when I say that consciousness permeates everything, it means that a psychic and who is able to make use of his abilities can see the smallest thing in the world and the largest things at the edge of the solar system. There's no limit to what you're able to see, governed by how small it is or how big it is.
I think I'd like to add to that. So not only is it possible to remote view the smallest thing, closest thing, or largest and farthest thing away, it also has something else to do with the fact that time isn't how we understand it either. There is no time in that space of consciousness.
That's right. Your consciousness is able to transcend time into the future.
Yes. So I have another question here, which is, I know you've been the monitor and the researcher. Were you ever a remote viewer at SRI? Did you ever happen to come into that room and decide, I think I'll do the remote viewing this time?
Well, the agreement was that the scientists would not be involved in remote viewing because remote viewing was considered unscientific, and it's something that Ingo Swann can do, but a scientist shouldn't be involved in that. So I saw a lot of psychic things, and of course I've had psychic precognitive dreams, but I was doing experiments with Pat Price, who was a psychic policeman, probably the most reliable, prodigious psychic that we've ever worked with. In our first experiments, my colleague, Hal Putoff, would hide someplace in the San Francisco Bay Area each day for 9 days. He'd be sent to some hiding place, and we had no idea. I had no idea where he'd be hiding. And I would sit with Pat Price, and he would describe and draw where he thought the hell would be, whether it be a swimming pool or a bowling alley or a beach or whatever you have in Palo Alto. And at the end of that time, we would have Pat Price's drawings and the traveling instructions that Hal had to go to his place. And we gave those 2 sets of drawings to a perceptual psychologist. And you say, when Price made the drawing of the ocean, where was Hal? When he drew a picture of the bowling alley, where was Hal hiding? So he had to match up 9 pictures against 9 sets of traveling instructions. And those were then ranked very close match, not so close match. It was a very close match. It would be a first place match. And of those 9 trials, 7 of the 9 were first place matches. The odds of like 1 in 100,000. And what it means is that if Pal had been kidnapped 9 days in a row, Price would have described the hiding place 7 out of those 9 times correctly, the first place he looked. So the very, very accurate, stunning result published in Nature magazine immediately.
Mhm.
So in this case, we were doing experiments. Hal had escaped from SRI and gone on vacation to South America someplace. And each day, Price would describe where Hal was at noon. And he would give descriptions of things like a marketplace or a harbor or a volcano or a church. And on the 5th day, Price didn't show up. So I'm sitting in our little shielded room with my tape recorder. This is Russ Targ and Pat Price. We're describing where Hal is in South America, but Price doesn't seem to be here today. Now 5 after 12, I'll have to do it myself. So I close my eyes, and the question is, where is Carmen Sandiego? I'm sitting in the room, close my eyes. Where in the world is Hal put off today? And I said, I see something like an island airport. It's an airport, and there's ocean at the end of the runway, and sand and grass on the right, and an airport building on the left. And that's the drawing I made.
Beautiful drawing.
Now, generally, we tell people not to guess at what the thing is. Don't name it. But this was so clear to me at the runway at an airport. I made the drawing, and Hal came back, and it turned out he had been at San Andreas Airport on an island off the country of Colombia. So he had been at the place that I show in the upper photograph, and the poor experimenter sitting in a shielded room drew the picture at the bottom. And the important thing about that picture, the reason I'm showing it, is that it shows that remote viewing is so easy that even a scientist can do it.
A very experienced scientist.
That's right.
I think, is that the last of our share?
Yeah.
So you hit the stop sharing and we'll get back to the regular screen. I want to talk a little bit about, this is remote viewing we've talked about in the past, but just because we're together here and I'm on my podcast, I wanted to share a little bit about the remote viewings that you and I did together. So I just want to share with our...
I'm happy to do that.
Great. I want to share with our audience that over the last 20 plus years, Russell and I have been doing remote viewing together. Every now and then he would just out of the blue occasionally call me on the phone and just say, oh, stop what you're doing and could you tell me what's in my hand right now? And on some of those instant ones, we had some very fun, remote viewings. And at that time, we were just sort of doing them spontaneously, so we didn't write them up and do Zoom for them. But our future ones that we decided to do after in this last year, 2022, we recorded and shared and validated through Zoom. But I just have to show you one that we don't have information or slide on, but I loved this one because you asked me what's in my hand, and I said to you, it's something very colorful with the lights of color just going up in reds and blues and yellows and all these pretty colors. And it would be like something I would hold in my hand like sparklers. So those were my responses to you. And then you showed me this thing that a friend of yours had made, which if people can see on the screen is sort of an LED light thing. It's not that big. And you can hold it in your hand and it has the lights coming up. I love doing that one. I thought it was really a fun remote viewing. But what I'd like to share is first of all, how you rank when you decide to review a remote viewing. The judges have to decide, how do we score this? And some of our listeners may have no idea how you come up with those. So I was wondering if you could explain to our audience the actual way that you rank something when you do a remote viewing and you're reviewing and judging it.
When we know the answer, that is, let's say Gail says, I see something long and thin and sparkly and has flashing lights.
Yes.
And then you decide to have no correspondence, some correspondence, mixture of correct and incorrect, good correspondence with unique matchable elements, good correspondence with physical information, and excellent correspondence. So those are the numerical things. You then, a judge gets make a decision based on his past experience. As Gail says, a good correspondence. Gail said, I see some flashing lights, and we could on a long thin object that has at least number 5 has good correspondence with unique matchable elements. She said flashing lights, and there are flashing lights. To get a 6, you have to go good correspondence with analytical information, naming the function. This really doesn't have a function, so she said basically all you could say, correct. So you probably give her a 6 or a 7, which are very hard to achieve with ordinary remote viewing.
Yeah.
What we have down here is, if you get a 3.5, that's a good enough match, so that in our experience, or the people who use this for wagering or in the market, a 3.5 on the scale is good enough to go into the market. I would probably require a 4 or a 5, but 3.5 is already, from professional people who do this all the time, a 3.5 is more than 50%, maybe 60% reliable.
So,
and Gail here was all the way up to a 5 or a 6, which is very, it's hard to say what more you could ask of her.
so I have 2 other ones I'm going to bring up now that my husband has come to help me figure out how to share. So grateful for his help. But before I push the next slide, I was wondering if you could let us know, is this the actual system that you used back in SRI, or was this something you created recently, or has this always been your ranking system?
We use this at SRI as a basis for formal judging.
Okay, all right. So if you could click your screen off, I was wondering if we could talk about, this was the icosahedron, and you gave this a score of 6. And I was wondering if you could I just thought we'd share with them that what I was trying to express here was that when we did the remote viewing, I felt that it was a metal object, yellow or bright. We know the red was incorrect.
And you said it's a crystal.
Right, like a crystal energy. And then I drew what looks exactly like one of the bars. If you see this shape here, this shape looks to me very much like these shapes here. But the most important thing that I kept coming up with and repeated to you over and over again, which I've never said in any remote viewing, was that all the lines are all the same. And that kept feeling so important to me, that everything was the same in this, and that it had some sort of an emanating energy. And I think you said this is a Greek symbol.
It's one of the Platonic solids.
So this was scored as a 6, and I just wanted the viewers.
I gave you a 6 because you had the idea that it was a metal crystal made of individual lines, and it's such an unusual object. If something's a crystal, normally you'd think it's a block of glass, like a quartz crystal, but you had the idea with your drawing at the top of the page that it had all the lines coming out of it.
I found this one very fun to do, and it just felt like I was right on, and then I didn't need to say anything more. Now I'm going to show another one we did. Okay, and I see a green line here, and here she is. Do you see Raggedy Ann?
I certainly do.
I mean Raggedy Andy. This one for me was I think this was rated at, I'm not sure what we gave this, a 5 or a 6. I'll have to look on the chart. But this one was one where, for me with remote viewing, there's a lot of feeling about the object, where I don't actually experience a whole lot of visual things, but I get a lot of feelings and information that just pops up in the screen in my mind. And the first thing that I came up with you was that I had an emotional reaction that it makes me want to smile. The object makes me want to smile, and it lifts my spirits. I had something that didn't mean anything at all, this little round squiggly thing in this little square box. I mentioned that it felt like a stuffed animal or a Snoopy.
Yeah, you said you wanted to hold it.
Yes, something makes you feel happy when you saw it, cutesy. Red, purple, some kind of a toy. A squishy.
And there are millions of girls and boys all over the world who just love the Raggedy Ann doll.
Yes.
It's like a world icon for love.
Well,
and you came on with the first thing you felt was a smile and the loving feelings.
and it's just a squishy toy that I'm reading it because my handwriting is so poor, but a squishy toy that feels good in my hands. And then I said something about hippies. And when you and I looked at the doll in detail, there was some kind of I can't read it on my screen, but there was a message written across the base of the doll. And it was sort of, I don't know if it was love but it was something that reminded me of hippie type words that we would use. And the other thing that I want to point out here is something that I've learned from you called AOL, which stands for analytical overlay. And I've learned that when these come up, I just like to write it on the side, and I know it has nothing to do with the target, but I have to write it down because then it sort of gets out of my space. But in this case, it was actually something else that was sitting on your desk. I had an AOL of a Buddha. And then you said to me, oh, I better clear my desk more for the future because there was a Buddha sitting right next to the Raggedy Andy. So I thought that was an interesting AOL that, that wasn't the target, but it shows that sometimes we're also reaching out and seeing in other spaces, as we're looking. And then last, well, anything you want to say about this?
No, I thought that I was very impressed that you came on with very strong feelings.
It's when I get emotional, when it has an emotional charge of something in the target, like if that had been a coffee cup, I wouldn't have come up, and I don't drink coffee, I wouldn't have come up with the same kind of emotional response like I would to something like this. And then last, I just want to show our little chart. Okay, so this was the times and scores that we did with the dates of the times that we were doing them.
So you got a 5 for Raggedy Ann.
Raggedy Ann got a 5, and icosahedron got a 6. So I wanted the audience to see the difference and how the scoring was done. But there was something else that you did with this, and it was something that I know Dean Radin had been looking at and things, which is discussing, I'm not sure if it was sidereal time, or I believe we sent this list to James Spottiswoode to give an opinion about, there's something about remote viewings or being psychic that might be affected by the planet, or I'm not exactly sure. I was wondering if you could explain that.
Well, James Spottiswoode was a mathematician, had the idea from his analysis of remote viewing that in sidereal, at 8 o'clock sidereal time, that is when the Earth at your location is, when the Earth is between you and the rest of the solar system, is when you get a superior remote viewing. It's as though the Earth blocks out the noise of the solar system at that hours. Now, I'm not sure that our data really shows that because we only have a handful of trials, but it's the idea that we don't know what the carrier for remote viewing is. We don't know how the signal gets to you, or if you're separate, or if you're entangled with this target all the time. But it appears that in an electrically noisy environment, whether it's electricity or noise from the solar system, that it interferes with your ability. And one of the things that's been shown in a number of places is that although we started using a shielded room to avoid trickery so nobody could send you the answer, being in a shielded room, blocking out all electricity is actually a superior place to do remote viewing because it mainly blocks out the electrical noise. So we found at SRI, much to our surprise, that people prefer doing remote viewing in a shielded room than in an ordinary office.
And let's see. I can't remember, was OW something, I forget what James Spottiswoode had said about, didn't fit in with the sidereal time, but there was some other global something, which I can't find the paperwork on it right now. But anyway.
Well, his idea was with sidereal at a particular 8 o'clock sidereal time, the Earth is between you and the rest of the galactic noise. People tend to do better remote viewing.
That was it, galactic noise. I also want to say, if our listeners can't see, but right behind to the left of Russell is I'm putting my arrow on here, is the front cover of his book, Third Eye Spies, which will, of course, we'll have in our description, etc. But I just wanted to point it out in case people are watching on YouTube that they can see the cover of your new book behind us. I have a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. And let's see. I just wanted to, I had to share about some of the stuff that we've done together. And there was one other thing we did together, which was something called the outbound remote viewing, which I believe that's what you were doing with Hal Putoff in the days of...
That's how we got started.
Right, that's how it got started.
The outbound remote viewing is very successful because there's no other noise. You just want to describe what it looks like where your friend is located.
I had never done that, and when you were working on your very successful film, Third Eye Spies, you had me come into the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and I did my first outbound remote viewing. And I loved doing it because all the other ones I had done were related to computers and photographs. This was the first time I did one where there was an actual human being at the other end. And I found that fascinating. And if anyone's interested in seeing that, it is on YouTube, and it's had thousands of views. And it's also in the extras in your film, Third Eye Spies. So if anyone wants to see Russell and I doing an outbound remote viewing together, that's where you'll find that. I was wondering if we could just talk a little bit about healing and spiritual healing that you do talk about with psychic ability in your book, and what type of healing, and did actually some of these things work?
Well, we didn't do healing in our program, but we're aware that there's a big increase in healing, even in medical circles. That is, there's now many papers published, particularly in the case of heart surgery, where you will have many hundreds of patients involved who've been undergone surgery, and half of them will have a distant person praying for them or sending them energy or the like. And what they show, and in my book, I identify the cases. I can't tell you this, I can't give you a citation now, but what they find are the cases where people send love or energy or healing thoughts to the person having surgery. Those people had better outcomes than the ones who did not have, than the controls.
In fact, we did an experiment at IONS. I think it was Marilyn Schlitz and I can't remember, Dean, and it was a large group of people, and it was an experiment about if they had a protocol of a whole group of people who had people that didn't pray for them, and it was people with cancer, and it had to do with their partners, compassionate care, I think, or something it was called. And it was about meditating and just sending love to the person who was having the cancer from their partner. And that when those partners went in to be tested, they needed less drugs, had less difficulties than the group that was not really being meditated, that they just went in and then had their tests done, and they would show no significant change. But the people who had been prayed for by their partner, specifically the partner, really did make an effect on the outcome of the people with cancer. So there are all kinds of interesting studies going on out there, and I think it's important for people to know about that.
The case that I'm familiar with was an experiment done by my daughter, Elizabeth Targ,
Yes.
who's a psychiatrist, and she worked with healers all over America, energy healers, spiritual healers, all sorts of different kinds of spiritual practices. And she has 60 AIDS patients. This is before AIDS drugs were available. And she divided those randomly into two groups, 30 and 30. And she would then have people sending energy, sending light, sending love, praying for them, whatever the discipline was. And the people who received spiritual healing had much better outcomes than the ones that did not. And this was published in the Western Medical Journal. And that was this paper was really the first of the series that simulated interest in distant healing, because this was done by a doctor under very good conditions and was statistically very significant.
Wonderful.
So if people offer to pray for you, accept their prayers.
I always do. I even call up and ask for them. I when I have friends that are dealing with illness or situations, I call my friends in Mongolia because their son is a monk at the monastery there in the capital of Mongolia, and he brings the name in of the persons that I suggest, and all the monks pray for them during that time. And I send prayers out with other people I know who are healers and do prayer, but I specifically go directly to Mongolia when I have my friends in need, and I put their name in there and ask for them to be prayed for. And I feel that is a beautiful area to be getting prayers from a large group of monks meditating in the center of Mongolia.
Well, you reach wherever you can. If you want to see the citation for Elizabeth's published paper, the author is Elizabeth Targ, and it's the Western Medical Journal, 1999.
Very good. So let's see where we are here. So I'm getting down to the end of our questions, so I have only a couple of questions left here. I guess two questions. why should people be interested in remote viewing? And from all of your research, what parts of the findings are you most confident about?
Well, let's see, in remote viewing, we have precognition. I'm pretty confident about the precognition and the remote viewing of distant objects. The whole body of work. I mean, we published 25-page paper, the proceedings of the Institute of Electrical Engineers, and a paper in Nature magazine. So we're pretty confident of the work that we've described here. From what we've done here is you and I have sort of discovered that experiments where you have immediate feedback to the viewer is very helpful. It makes it seem that this model of the the brain that gets the feedback is in touch with the brain that's doing the viewing. So if I ask you to describe something and you get immediate feedback, that's quite helpful. It's not essential, but it's quite helpful in remote viewing.
I think people who work with police departments and places where they're trying to help find missing persons is one of the is a wonderful way. I guess you had been involved with the Patty Hearst case back then, and giving these people information to help find the perpetrator is wonderful use of remote viewing.
Yeah, I could say one of the things that interferes with remote viewing is that people read our paper and want to replicate it, and they say, "Okay, we've got a hidden object. It's either a pencil, a radio, a picture, or something. Which one do you think it is?" And that makes it much harder to do. So the scheme that J.B. Ryan was doing at Duke University, where you always knew that the target was a circle, a square, a star, a wavy line, or a cross, giving the person that information up front greatly interferes with their ability to do it, because in any kind of psychic functioning, the signal to noise ratio is the problem. And we don't know how to increase the signal, but by hiding the whole target pool is a way of decreasing the noise. So in asking, you have no idea what object I'm going to show you. And the fact that you don't know what the target pool is makes it easier for you to do, because there's no noise in the channel.
There's something that you've always said, and I find it to be true so many times, when sometimes I'm in a group with people and all of a sudden I just know things about someone in the room. It's usually what they're trying to not let anyone know about. It's like whatever you're hiding seems to actually shine brighter. I think, what was it that you say? It's like a beacon of light.
Pat Price said that. Pat Price once described top secret material at a national security agency listening post, and they wanted to know, why did you zero in on that top secret material? And Price said, the more you hide things, the more it shines like a beacon in psychic space.
I have learned so much from working with you and Dean, and being a subject in all these different experiments, that there were things I had not known that I was capable of doing until I learned about it being with you guys. So I want to thank you very much for everything that you've taught and shared with me, and that you're an amazing, remarkable human being. And I'm just blessed to have you in our life. And I just want there's so many people, when I mention your name, and they get so excited that there'll be a show and they'll get to hear more about what you have to say. So you're a welcomed guest And I'm wondering if there's anything else you would like to share with the audience before we wind up our show.
Well, just that I very much appreciate the chance of working with a loving psychic person like yourself.
Oh,
The privilege.
well, thank you. I plan this year for a small, medium at large book to be published. So I will actually give you a copy that we talked about 20 something years ago when you encouraged me to write a book. So just letting you know, my dedication here is that a thank you, because I would have never done it had you and Dean not said, you should write a book. So you've done so many.
Maybe we'll have a joint book party when our books come out.
Yes. So, well, I'm very excited for yours. The cover is wonderful. I am so inspired and impressed by, you're at your 89th birthday and you're still writing books, and you come from a publishing background, and you've done it all your life. And I know you've also, just in case our audience doesn't know, Russell actually reissued and published a numerous amount of books that were out of print that are on these areas and subjects of paranormal.
And
And
Hampton Roads let me do that.
can you just tell us about that, just so they'll know?
Well, Hampton Roads let me bring back into print a number of books all by famous authors where the book was either hard to find or out of print. And I was glad that I had a chance to do that.
And there were many, I think, Mental Radio, was that one of them?
Yeah, Mental Radio, which was Upton Sinclair's book. And there are quite a few others that were out of print. Yes,
so there was quite a collection. So they'll be able to find that also. So I want to just thank you very much, Russell, for sharing this time with our audience.
I'm happy to be with you, Gail.
It's really wonderful to have you here, and our audience can see Raggedy Andy sitting in the background on the chair right below a 50-year ago photo of you and Hal in front of SRI. And
there was a celebration picture 50 years later.
Yes, I think that we'll get that up here in our talk. I'm going to put those two photos together for everybody to see, 50 years then and 50 years now. And I just want to thank you for being the amazing person you are, being in our life, sharing and doing so much for others, and for developing the laser for wind shear that protects people when they fly in jets.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All our love, and keep on remote viewing. Have a great and wonderful week. And listeners, subscribe, like, share. We're so happy to have you here, and we look forward to your comments. So have a wonderful week. And this is show 44, and we're just moving along with wonderful guests like Russell. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Gail. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.